So there are no atheists. There are only agnostics. And if there's only agnostics, then we must address the claim of knowledge. You don't know there's a God. And once you stay there, then we can start discussing.
That don't make no sense. Perhaps we settle this the traditional way.
You mean a showdown?
Welcome back to Project Nihilist. I hope y'all's doing great. I'm just your typical Cletus nihilist, you know, chucking out ad homs while looking for top left YouTubers, and boy did I find us a doozy.
Michael Behe, Stephen Meyer, and John Lennox are, in my opinion, some of the heavy hitters of the Christian space, not only in apologetics, but just their understanding of science. And there's no counter arguments to nothing they discuss.
No, senor. We will have a dance contest.
What happens when a mathematician, a biologist, and a scientist, who are all strong believers of God, discuss the evidence for God and evolution?
Yeah, they sound like a bunch of drunks at the Olive Garden. Hey, you stupid son of a bitch, add that caveat at the end, because it sounds like you're arguing for evolution.
You get 10 minutes of phenomenal discussion and a complete annihilation of evolution.
You serious?
Just their understanding of science.
I have taken many years of jazz and tap.
If creation had any scientific evidence, it would be taught in public schools, and Michael Behe and Stephen Meyer wouldn't be listed as pseudo-scientists. I mean, at least John escapes that particular stigmata because he's like a mathematician and other things too.
And this discussion, which I'm just going to show you a segment of it, is, in my opinion, some of the best information about creation, God, and how evolution is completely washed up, right?
You watch your mouth.
Oh, you be careful now, you hear? Before you go and say something you're going to regret for the rest of your days.
Like what? Like the wrong kid died?
Oh, no!
I mean, you can say evolution is washed up with all the confidence you want, but we all know it's your worst fucking nightmare.
Things have certainly changed around here.
So they discuss, using Darwin's own words, some of the major flaws of evolution.
He had this crazy idea about breeding pine trees.
I'm going to play this whole segment. I want you to stick around because I'm going to give some of my thoughts at the end, but I really hope this video encourages you. Check it out.
Let's get into it. We have to watch these titans of science blow evolution out of the water, and there are no counter-arguments or atheists. And design isn't indicative of simplicity. It's all about irreducible complexity. Also, you'd shit your pants if you knew how long it took me to make this video. So do me a favor, no matter our agreements, you know, click the like and subscribe button, please.
They just simply pointed to the fact that Darwin's theory is anemic when it comes to explaining very complex things like the cell.
So Charles Darwin isn't evolution's pope. His book was published 170 years ago, and he had no knowledge of DNA. He'd never heard of things like population genetics and allele frequencies.
Two quotations, Michael, two quotations. Charles Darwin in The Origin. If Darwin himself writes this, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed, which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive, slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down.
So this type of fallacy is known as cherry picking. If you read that chapter of Darwin's book, it starts out with that question, and then it goes on in great detail during the rest of the chapter to explain what in the hell he was talking about.
Close quote. That's Darwin. He puts the test right there in 1859. Here's Michael Behe. The question then becomes, are there irreducibly complex systems in the cell? Yes, there are many.
Absolutely. As I said, the cell is chock full of machines. Machines need many parts. They can't be built by numerous successive slight modifications.
So one of the important things about something that is designed is simplicity, not irreducible complexity. It amazes me.
But let me draw attention to one little sneaky trick that Darwin put into that quotation. He says, if it could be demonstrated that something couldn't possibly happen. Right. So he's putting a burden on his opponents to prove a negative.
No, that's not what it says. It says, if it could be demonstrated, then my theory would be useless. He's not challenging you to try to demonstrate a thing that he doesn't think you can demonstrate.
Which science cannot do and never has. No theory has ruled out all rival theories.
Creationists love to trick their science illiterate viewers into not understanding what a theory is and pretending that there are other conflicting accepted scientific theories out there. I can only think of one example off the top of my head, and that's supersymmetry versus the multiverse. However, they are not diametrically opposed concepts like creationists want you to think about evolution and God.
To be accepted. But we have great evidence and that it can't.
Mikey, I need you to repeat that again for the audience.
We have great evidence and that it can't.
So this is one of the more ignorant and idiotic things said in this entire video. Evidence is not used to prove that that did not happen.
And we have absolutely no evidence that natural selection acting on random mutation could build much of anything.
Well, we could choke on that word salad for a week, or just recognize that incoherent babbling sounds like incoherent babbling.
So here's the objection. The objection. I say this as if I know enough to be authoritative. Here's an objection. And the objection runs, all right, it's very hard to see how you evolve a mousetrap beginning with a little wooden platform. And true, it can't work until all the pieces are in place.
I am completely familiar with Michael Behe's mousetrap, irreducible complexity bullshit argument. However, I could take a 5-gallon bucket, the metal handle, a piece of wood, some tape, and some peanut butter, and make a more effective rat trap. You know, especially if I'm trying to get more than one kill in a row, because after one kill with his mousetrap, you got to come back, put more energy in the system. But my mousetrap, hell, it'll kill him till the damn bucket overflows.
On the other hand, suppose you do evolve it in 2 or 3 pieces and they sit around for centuries. They don't confer any advantage on the organism, but they don't harm it either.
And a major misunderstanding to evolution, suggesting that beneficial mutations had to always be present in the genome for advantages to occur.
So they're these strange accretions on which natural selection is neutral. It doesn't select for them, but it doesn't select against them.
All of the girls in high school wanted me to ask them to senior prom because of my hexachronium. I'm just kidding. I don't have hexachronium.
And then after eons and eons, we worry about the maths later, after eons and eons, the final piece drops into place and suddenly it functions.
So I feel like I need to redirect attention back to my original point. The creator of this video thinks that these 4 guys are the most awesome theist and scientist ever.
Plausible?
No, that's ridiculous. I mean, realistically, would you? No, that's ridiculous. I mean, realistically, would you?
I'm not here to make fun of the host, but the fact that he's laughing at this makes me realize that he's oblivious to what they're even talking about.
He's being very careful of Darwin, but he's swatting me aside.
Yeah.
Right, go ahead.
No, if you think, suppose you didn't have a mousetrap. So you say, well, what can I do? I'll just go into my garage and pick out a few pieces that would function as a mousetrap. And you say, well, I need a spring. Well, here's one in this grandfather clock I have. You wind up, I'll just use that. And I need a hammer to squash the mouse.
Dum 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 dum.
I'll use this crowbar over here.
So when I picture Michael Behe trying to kill a mouse with a crowbar,
there you go.
There are just so many more effective ways out there to get it done that I don't think they try to use their imagination. No! The one thing that creationists will always forget is that a good design requires simplicity. Michael Behe has never considered a glue trap or poison. Instead, he wants to use the flip, click, clappity, slap trap.
But the pieces aren't adjusted to each other. You can't just take random pieces and put them together.
Thank you. Back to my original point in the intro. Design is indicative of simplicity, not complexity where you're using a bent fucking hammer and a crowbar to kill a rat.
And natural selection, which, as Darwin said, is constantly scrutinizing life, would not be expected to make things in the shape that they would need to be for some future use.
Michael Behe just went against the creationist creed and suggested that evolution is not for a future goal, but currently. And we got to shut that shit down right now. We can't let him talk anymore.
They would only, they would hone them for what they were doing right now.
All right.
Can I weigh in on that?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea to make that hard cut right here, because Michael Behe was about to make a fool of himself.
Sure,
because there's a connection between what Mike's talking about and the mathematical problems that John was alluding to.
If you get it in order, you get extra points. If you, okay, now he's asking you other questions.
And that is that in these actual systems, these nanomachines that Mike has made famous through his work, for example, the bacterial flagellar motor.
And yes, you probably heard that correctly. I believe he said bacterial flagellum modem, when the word flagellum would have been just as useful because it encompasses many microorganism means of locomotion.
Person, woman, man, camera, TV.
Or the ATP synthase. One's a rotary.
This man has made the flagellar motor a rock star.
Well, he kind of has. He kind of has. Actually. But it's, you know, it's a 30-part rotary engine.
They say, that's amazing. How did you do that? I do it because I have like a good memory, because I'm cognitively there.
So here's the problem. That thing has never only ever been that function. It has served other purposes. You know, it's not a rotary engine that's actually a turbine jet engine. It can change. You know, it's not a 30-stroke hit-and-miss engine.
The ATP synthase is a turbine with multiple parts, but the parts are made of proteins.
You know, I've heard that other scientific authority on creation, Kent Hovind, describe the flagellum as a turbine jet engine that oscillates at like 50,000 hertz, which would emit visible light. Okay, that was probably an exaggeration. However, they do suggest they should be moving fast enough that they should flash boil water because they're so energetic.
And proteins are in essence, the toolbox of the cell. That they perform specific functions in view of their three-dimensional shapes.
Well, thank you for clearing that up, Einstein. I wasn't aware that cell theory knew about this amazing concept.
So they make the parts of molecular machines. They function as enzymes to catalyze reactions at super fast rates.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
Enzymes speed up chemical reactions. Welcome to middle school science class, y'all.
They help process information.
So yeah, trying to smuggle in that word information there, like it's last week's bowel movements written down, is a deceptive tactic that creationists and biblical literalists love to use to confuse people.
But if you were to build a system like the flagellar motor...
Come on, not again, dude. Everybody knows that the R in flagellum is silent.
You need 30 proteins that fit together in an integrated fashion.
Don't you mean integrated? I know, I shouldn't harp on about this, but it doesn't even feel like he's even trying to say flagellum.
But that requires genetic code. Each one of those proteins requires a long stretch of genetic information to build the protein.
So what he said is dumb. It only takes 4 pair of base codes to code for a protein. However, it might take like 450 pair to code for an amino acid. There have been found more amino acids in outer space than there are required for life on Earth.
And so what you're talking about is not just, you know, some bent hammer or something sitting around doing nothing. You're talking about a need for genetic information that is sufficient to overcome these long odds against building the protein in the first place. So it'd be like, to change the metaphor slightly, a gigantic haystack the size of the North American continent, and you're only allowed to search 1/1037th of the continent. Maybe.
So when you're talking about a fraction of a whole and you use a number larger than 1, you kind of sound like a fucking idiot, dude.
A tiny little square of Southern California. If that's the case, are you more likely or less likely to
find the needle?
To find the needle.
Everyone knows if you're looking for a needle in a haystack, you use a magnet. I mean, what the fuck is up with this guy limiting me to Southern California when he knows that I'm from
Alabama?
And the answer is you're overwhelmingly more likely not to find the needle than to find it, which is to say the mutation selection mechanism lacks the creative power to generate new biological information.
Close to the creative.
Exactly, and that's for one protein.
One protein.
They love ground. Y'all on the ground make snow angels together?
Proteins necessary to make the waving little tail, which is only one machine. All right.
Yeah.
That, in a sense, is before you said anything about the fact that the information required is linguistic.
I thought I was supposed to be the drunk one here, but did dude just seriously suggest that DNA and RNA is linguistic? Like, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day until the last recorded syllable of time, and all of our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusky death. Out, out, brief candle, for life's but a walking shadow, a poor player who struts and frets his hour upon the stage and is heard no more. Can't believe I actually blurted out that literal DNA code correctly. I am hoping, though, that later on in the video Shakespeare comes up, or I'm going to sound like a drunk idiot. Shit, I forgot the most important part. It's a tale told by a moron, full of sound and fury and signifying nothing.
And linguistic language is not produced by random processes.
Right.
And this is
Listen to this.
hugely
You've got to
important
explain
thing.
what you mean.
Well,
Listen to this.
It's
take
linguistic in the way the
Take
DNA...
the human genome.
Code.
Exactly, yes.
Code. All
The
right.
human genome is the longest word we've ever discovered, and we can call it a word.
Explain what you mean.
Well,
Listen to this.
It's
take
linguistic in the...
Our host finally spoke up, thinking that this is the nail in the coffin, and I think it's the worst point. The human genome is 98% similar to chimpanzees, too. That doesn't bode well for creationists when those two words are so similar you couldn't recognize the difference.
Because it's written in a chemical language of 4 letters. And all those letters, strung out like a computer program, have got to be in the right order, otherwise it breaks down. I mean, most programs, if you change a letter, that's the end of the program.
Oh no, a letter out of place in a numerical coding programming system. You know, I screwed up my Shakespeare quote. Does that mean the message didn't come across?
So we're dealing with something absolutely gigantic in terms of probabilities before we even think of the extra complexity.
Considering all the things I've done for money, I ain't one to judge, but...
arises through the folding of the proteins and all the epigenetic information that's been discovered in recent years. That's
information beyond DNA that controls how the lower level information is used.
So again, they seem to misunderstand or misrepresent everything they say. Epigenetics is the study of how your behaviors and environments can cause changes that affect the way your genes functions, like radiation and smoking cigarettes and drinking too much beer.
Bewildering in its complexity.
Why are they making this more complicated than it needs to be? Oh, they're creationists and they got a lie for their sky daddy.
Don't you say anything about my daddy.
And therefore it becomes a huge stress. And my own simplistic view is to say I prefer an explanation that makes sense to one that doesn't make sense.
Well, hell, I guess I ain't never looked at it like that before.
I prefer the I do not know rather than just pulling shit out of my ass and feeding it to people like it's food.
There it is.
If I could add just a little something. We're talking about this ultra-complex machine, the bacterial flagellum, and saying that but Darwinian processes are laughably inadequate to explain it.
Well, no shit, Sherlock. Darwin published his book 170 years ago. We've come so far since then. Here's a short list slide I made for another video. Gene theory, endogenous retroviruses, human chromosome 2, direct observation, and the fossil record, just to name a few.
But I want to point out that it can explain things a whole lot more simple than a bacterial flagellum. We talked about how many amino acids these things have, and there's 30 proteins and 400 amino acids, and so 12,000-ish or so. But in order to develop resistance to the anti-malarial drug chloroquine,
And some people would add to it hydroxychloroquine.
it took trillions and trillions
billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and
of malarial cells, Plasmodium falciparum, to get 2 crummy mutations. 2, and we're talking about...
And of course, it's not that mathematician smiling like a geek bringing up them big, scary numbers.
12,000 for the flagellum. Now, trillions, and for each extra mutation, it goes up exponentially. That, Steve was talking in exponential language, but
I'm just getting completely shocked that this is this guy's fleur-de-lis of evolution killer.
That's another factor of a trillion for another one, and another factor of a trillion for the next one, too. So this is truly, truly...
Poor John here, the actual mathematician, looks utterly exhausted and defeated at this guy's multiplications of trillions. And he can't tell him to shut the fuck up because they're on the same team.
You know, even much, much simpler things than we've been talking about are beyond Darwinian processes. I just want to add one little cute thing is that these days scientists can do evolution in the laboratory, grow bacterial cultures and for a long time and see what happens. And a man named Richard Lenski, a biologist at Michigan, did this for a bacterium called E. coli. And one of the first mutations that he saw that really helped the bacteria grow faster was when it deleted the genes, got rid of the genes for the bacterial
instead of adding information,
flagellum.
it's dropping it.
Considering that we don't know shit about the experiment, we don't know what the damn test was even about, the flagellum take a lot of energy to use. So when a bunch of bacteria chilling in a fucking perfect environment, like end up not growing the thing that's going to burn up energy, yeah, that makes perfect sense when it comes to evolution.
Exactly, and that's something we haven't touched on yet, but it's oftentimes a whole lot faster and easier to get rid of stuff and to improve a species' chance to survive and prosper than to
But you
build
can't
stuff.
get a new species by dropping out information, by becoming stupider.
That's correct.
That's fucking stupid for a couple reasons. Nothing ever outgrows what it originally was. And why wouldn't you be able to take things away and get a different species?
Adding new capabilities requires new proteins, which requires solving this combinatorial problem, the search for those exceedingly rare sequences among the vast number of gibberish sequences that don't do anything useful.
Little parenthesis.
So again, you're back to the needle in the haystack problem.
These three men clearly know what they're talking about.
You do have to love how two people can watch the same video and come to opposite conclusions. And the best part is, we haven't even gotten into it yet.
I love the fact that they didn't castigate.
Castigate.
Verb, meaning reprimand severely.
You know, atheists or, you know, they didn't say anything bad about evolutionists. They just simply pointed to the fact that Darwin's theory is anemic when it comes to explaining very complex things like the cell.
You ever see the video where Buzz Aldrin punches a flat earther in the face?
Whack, if I ever thought of saying I misrepresented myself. Away from me. You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
That's what all these guys are doing to Darwin. They cannot disprove evolution, so instead they want to go up to him and they want to say, hey man, we know all this shit that you didn't know and you was wrong. And yeah, maybe he wasn't perfect, but he isn't the Pope. Even without Charles Darwin, there would still be evolution.
When we look at things with our scientific instrumentation, whether it be a telescope or a microscope,
he thinks this entire is the sum of science and that you can only see it with your eyes. Dude, do you really not know that there were microscopes around when Darwin was alive?
It's like the deeper we look into space, the more complex it becomes, the more fine-tuned it becomes.
Dude, you literally just said in the same sentence that it becomes more fine-tuned and complex at the same time. Do you not even understand that you're missing the entire point?
When we look deeper into the cells, the more complex they become. And Darwin didn't have this capability, this access in the 1800s. He didn't have high-power microscopes.
Darwin's theory is so impressive because he didn't have things like electron microscopes. You don't get to go, well, hindsight being 20/20 and all, we should never mention Darwin's name ever again. It's like a flat earther making fun of Isaac Newton for also being an alchemist, while at the same time embracing Tesla's electrostatic universe and denying gravity.
To see the complexity of the cell.
You stupid asshole, if only you'd have lived long enough to know what I know now.
But the deeper we use our scientific instrumentation, the more it points to God.
Look, man, I understand why you're saying that with such confidence, but have you taken any college-level science? I mean, you don't really seem that educated on the topic, but man, you're so sure about it. You know, that's called Dunning-Kruger. If you've never heard that Dunning-Kruger term before, here it is charted out, and this dude, he's top left.
The more points to the fingerprint of God that these things are designed. And there's no counter arguments to nothing they discuss,
Look, I'm just your average old Cletus, and I refuted almost everything they said. Hell, I had to stop myself or we'd have been here all frickin' day.
They have even discussed some of the objections, and they kind of answered those in the whole long form video, but there's no arguments. What atheists and evolutionists will typically do, they will just resort to ad hominem attacks.
Well, of course, I chucked out a couple ad homs, but it still isn't like there wasn't a single point that was made that I didn't refute. I'm thinking about going and looking for the original video and turning it into a fallacy flashcard edition, because it was awful. Like, it's literally the lesson on how to recognize bad arguments.
To attack the people, to attack their degrees or their education and say, well, the education is not valid because they don't believe in evolution.
So here's an ad hominem. I believe that your education makes you unqualified to know anything about evolution. However, if you disagree, contact me in my comments section and I'll find some way for us to get in on a Zoom call or something.
They appeal to authority.
When some people cite this fallacy, they often misrepresent it, like agreeing with any authority is wrong. But no, it's more like you go to your dentist and he tells you don't need chemotherapy. That's different than your book where you tell me that I've got to listen to everything Lord Voldemort tells me to do. That is the fallacious appeal to authority that you think you're talking about.
That there's so many other scientists who believe in the delusion of evolution, and that these guys are somewhat discredited.
Within seconds of accusing others of Fuchs' fallacious reasoning, he's committed multiple offenses, and I suspect a few more.
These guys are somewhat discredited, or they would do the special pleading fallacy where they just say, well, instead of addressing these claims and arguments, they would just say, well, there's no evidence for God in the first place.
I think I've addressed all the arguments without once ever saying that there is no God. Yeah, I'm almost sure that this has got to get worse before it gets better, right?
So let's just discard this stuff and let's just attack the point that there's no evidence for a God. They won't even try to attack these arguments because they cannot be attacked. These are scientists. These guys know this information, and they are very well versed in depth in what they understand. Honestly, there is no true atheist.
Anyone who's made it this far, I dare you to come up with a worse no true Scotsman fallacy. The level of mental gymnastics being used.
To be a true atheist, you have to know with absolute certainty that there is no God anywhere in the universe. And if you claim to know that there is no God anywhere in the universe,
cool story, bro, but that sounds like a you problem. Your God isn't the one who's supposed to be hiding in deep, dark corners of the universe somewhere.
That would make you omniscient, that would make you God, and you would just defeat the purpose of saying there is no God, because you would be God, but we know there's no human being that knows all things. So there is, even an atheist must concede the fact that there is a possibility that God exists somewhere in the deepest part of the universe that they don't know anything about.
Dude doesn't seem to have the most elementary grasp on what an atheist is. He's going to have one trouble dealing with me because I'm a nihilist and I don't believe in his God. I don't believe in Allah, Hare Krishna, Buddha, any of that shit.
So at best, there are only agnostics in the world.
Yeah, I had that same stupid thought for years when I was younger, calling myself an agnostic. And then I realized I was doing that for other people, and then I started calling myself an atheist, and I'm actually an anti-theist, a fucking nihilist through and through.
No one can say there is no God with absolute certainty. They can't say that, but
if I ever claimed I was 100% certain about anything, I would be ignorant in my own methodologies, and I would need to review my own perspective.
First, the overture.
Atheists will say, well, I lack a belief in God. I don't want to make a claim. I just lack a belief. Well, guess what? A tree lacks a belief in God, but a tree doesn't have a brain.
Yeah, the brainless tree is still evidence of a tree. You have no evidence for your God except for your Bible. Your entire video falls on its ass.
Wait, here comes the crescendo.
A tree doesn't make claims about the origin of the universe or the purpose and meaning of life.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, y'all don't know shit. I'ma learn you, though. I'ma learn you.
Trees don't do that. Humans do. So to say there's a lack of belief is just a cop-out. The reality is, it's intellectually dishonest. It is.
No, it's not dishonest, because you are not me, and you cannot possibly know what I think. You can't have lived the life that I've lived. I mean, congratulations to you for being able to stick your head in the fucking sand.
So there are no atheists. There are only agnostics. And if there's only agnostics, then we must address the claim of knowledge. You don't know there's a God. And once you stay there, then we can start discussing.
That don't make no sense. Cut.
All right, let's leave it there for now. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. That means a lot to me.